Yeah, we're live. 8:50-ish. Close this thing up. Buttercup. Tonight, I want to gripe about something. It's not a gripe. No engine family is perfect. The LS is a perfect example. The one thing I would like to see, and this is more than just the LS, because this is fairly common. The excuse me, the damper is pressed on, and I just don't like that. And it's selfish of me. I realize it going into this conversation. I realize that I shouldn't feel this way, especially when I look out of my truck and I see my pressed on factory damper with a factory bolt and the Loctite that they use, and they put it on with 75 Duggas, whatever the factory spec is. It's a lot. And it's still going and still driving all the accessories because they spent a lot of time and engineering manpower, mind power, to figure out what it takes to drive those things for that long and for it not to slip. And it works well. And they did a good job. But being as spoiled as we are, I want to be able to put superchargers on these things, and I want to be able to drive them and multiple superchargers. Maybe I want to put a Kenny Bell and a Vortec on it. And so shout out to the guys at Vortec and AFR and Brian Tui Racing for helping out the channel. And the problem is that, like everybody, putting stuff on the dyno or whatever, sometimes last minute and you get lazy and you're like, let's just put it on there. And we'll tighten the bolt up a lot. It'll work fine. And then it never does. And then I'm arrogant or unintelligent enough to blame the engineers at GM for making a substandard assembly that doesn't allow me to put a supercharger on there. Because all we have to do is have it be like the previous small block Chevy where it has a key. I like the keys. And in fact, I like longer keys so that there's more surface area, more contact. It's stronger. The keys, I think, should be stout and hold it in place. And then obviously on the blower stuff, on the aftermarket crank, you have the cool dual keys, for a blower thing, because the more things that you're trying to drive, especially if you're, if it's on off a throttle kind of thing and it's kind of ratcheting back and forth. I mean, nothing breaks things more than doing that with it. So you can have the dual keys. I mean, obviously the aftermarket has come to the rescue for all of this, and they've made it fairly easy. The guys at ATI, who I love, they do fantastic stuff over there. They have key dampers. And so most aftermarket cranks, for like if you put a stroker crank in your LS, put a 4-inch, build a 408, build a 383, whatever the 4-inch, well, it would still be a 383 and a 48. But the aftermarket cranks are keyed. And so you can put an ATI damper on them. You can hone them so that they're the right, if you want a press fit. Personally, I like it to be a 0 fit and then a key. It's not as strong. And then maybe it doesn't transmit as much or absorb as much it doesn't do as much damping for being a damper. It doesn't do as much of that. Now, it's not a balancer. A lot of guys get that confused. It's not a balancer because this thing is internally balanced. So all the things that are on the outside of it are all neutral. And so it's a damper, it's a vibration dampener, and it's taking out vibration and harmonics. It needs to be more than likely, I'm assuming, that the tighter it is on there, it's pressed, the better it does its job. And obviously they tighten the snot out of that bolt. So to secure that on there. I know because we've put them on there or we put them on there very, very tight. Probably not as tight as the factory wanted to recommend them. But I know that on some instances, we had to turn particularly the electric guns, we had to turn them all the way up. And they had to have new batteries in them to get some of these bolts off because they were fairly serious. So that thing is fairly tight. But the key to making these work, and if you want to put a Vortec supercharger on there, or a ProCharger, or Kenny Bell, the Torque Storm, whatever you want to run on there, Magnuson, put an LSA blower on there, you want to put an M90 on there, which we've done. If you want to run those kinds of things, you'll be driving a blower. The blower is going to take more power to drive, and so more load on the interface between the damper and the crank snout, more load, and it's much more likely to slip, because the more that you load that, the more it's going to want to like twist that. And so that's why we have to put the pins in them. Now there's a couple of ways to do the pins. One is that, you know, they have it set up so you have a drill guide, and then you drill right in between the parting line, the intersection of the crankshaft and the damper, and you drill in between there and slide a roll pin in there, and you tighten the bolt back up, and away you go. Sure, it's really the kits that they have now make that very simple. The other way to do that, and this is what the guys from ATI do, and they do it because they have a key damper, the way that they have it broached, it's more like a standard small block Chevy. So it's got a keyway in it. And so what they do, they're not gonna make you broach the your crank snout, because you'd have to take everything apart to do that. But what you do is you drill 90 degrees to it, and you just drill a hole through it, and then you put a roll pin in there, or a pin. They're not roll pins because they're solid. Put a pin in there, and then when you put the bolt in, the bolt holds the pin up. But then when you slide the damper on there, it slides on, the keyway slides over the dowel that's sticking up, and you can even do multiple ones, and, you know, for added strength. And then, like I said, the bolt holds the pin up, and then you slide it on there, and you have a key dampener. It works good. We've used them a lot, and we've used them on some fairly high horsepower stuff, and it works fine. So it's fairly easy to solve. The problem is that it's not solved already for us. We have to go the extra step. And usually my complaint is more about me not having the thing that I want when I want it. When I'm trying to get it done, I want to do the test, and the belt's slipping, or the damper's slipping. Because the other thing that happens, if the damper slips, the bolt loosens itself up, and then the damper can come off and shoot across the room, and, you know, all sorts of bad things can happen. So it's not really a good deal. So really the answer to this, to my complaining and my griping about this, is to have more preparation and go, look, hey, you're running a blower on this. You're not doing it for 2 or 3 weeks. Just pin it and get it done. So, but, you know, you come down there and go, okay, let's put this thing up. And you're like, you know what? I don't have my pin kit here. Let's just run it. Let's just hope for the best. That never works out. And so therefore I then get to complain that and what happens is when the damper slips on it too, and it rotates on there, it galls up the crankshaft too, and the inside of the dampener. And so, you know, that's not a good situation to have the crank like that. In fact, I think that the 5.3 crank is probably in the L33 probably in need of being replaced for that reason, because that's happened. It had happened a number of times before I finally pinned the crank, and I don't recommend it. It's not a good deal. So you guys know, tomorrow the discussion is going to be something very interesting, and we should have a lot of people arguing about this. If you notice, I put up another video just taken from our conversations with the 706 and 317 heads on the boosted application. And I thought that I tried to cover everything, including the timing. And so I put in more, a lot of guys don't come to the live feed. So I've been taking segments out of the front part of the live feed where all the tech talk is, and then adding graphs and all kinds of stuff to make it more of a video that lots more people can watch. And they did. And so it's doing well, and that's good. But and toward the end of the video, I talk about, because I knew that people were going to talk about this, is all the 317 guys are going to jump on but I can run more boost with the 317 because it has lower compression. I'm like, yeah, I know that. We covered that. We talked about that. I talked about that. We talked about that in the video. I said, that's our tuning window. Remember that we talked about in that? But, because honestly, I don't think on that particular one, I don't think that the 317s are ever going to overcome those 706 hits. Not in any realistic amount of power, and not in any kind of level that a guy would run a stock head on there. And so, but the point is that on a 4.8 or 5.3, I just run the 706 heads. I wouldn't be changing heads And 99% of these people don't need to be worrying about some little sliver where that may or may not happen. But what they should be worried about is two other things. They should be worried about, how much ever power they want to make. I want to make 600 horsepower. We shouldn't be having a cylinder head conversation if you want to make 600 horsepower or 700 horsepower. Just put a turbo on there and go do it. You don't need to worry about any of this other stuff. That doesn't matter what Richard's saying. Just put a cam and springs and a turbo and injectors and a pump and just go do it. It will work out just fine. No matter what you have, it's going to work out just fine. But the tuning window issue is another thing with the 317s. Yes, if you put 317 heads on and you can run more boost and or more timing on your given octane level that you're running on. Somebody brought up 87 octane. I'm like, you should not be trying to run your turbo motor on 87 octane. That's nonsense. But if you want to have a bigger tuning window, you can do that. I still would never recommend them for a 4.8 or 5.3. On a 6.0, that's fine. I think that's a better choice for them. And I think that the combination of static compression and tuning window on that, I think that's fine. I wouldn't ever put them on a 4.8 or a 5.3. I don't care how big the tuning window got. I don't know if it was a tuning door or a barn door. It wouldn't make any difference. I wouldn't put them on there. It's just going to be way too soft and soggy, and it's not going to be great. That being said, you can make a lot of power like that if you want to do that. But it is going to be less than you could do going the other way. But that's not even what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about, what we're going to talk about tomorrow is, and this should be equally problematic or equally responsive, I should say, for the people making comments, is there's a myth, notice the word that I use there, that you need a bigger carburetor for a dual plane than you do for a single plane. And so tomorrow we're going to talk about that. I've got airflow numbers and graphs, and I don't have graphs because I can't show you those, but I have data. And so we're going to talk about that tomorrow. So that should be an interesting thing. So we'll see what you guys got going on here. Josh, what's going on? Scuba Sam, like Scuba Steve. let your troops gather for the briefing. They'll be here. Interference fit. Max gap in the end of the flange. Mine's at 1450. I agree. I wish I had a way to prime a complete one with oil sitting on an engine stand. The only dumb thing about an LS is when it's in a Ford. Ooh, shots fired. Hey, as much as I love my Mustang and I would eventually maybe turn it back to stock, I guess, to restore it. But an aluminum 5.3 in there would just be awesome. The only dumb thing about the LS is it the lifters? No, I see people talk about that. I don't have lifter problems. The motors that I get from the wrecking yard just go on and then they run with all the cams that I put in them. The only lifter problem I've ever had is one that had a lifter problem when I got it from the wrecking yard. And it wasn't the lifter problem so much as that they just worn out the lifter trays, because it had probably like mine. Mine are probably sloppy too. It allowed the lifter to rotate around and then wiped out the cam. But that's not, you don't know how many miles that, if that happened to mine at 350,000 miles, I'm like, that's not a lifter problem. That's still pretty good. 350,000 miles, you can't expect it to go more than that. So I know guys talk about lifter tick and all that stuff, but I just haven't seen that. And I think the cam location is awesome. And probably my engine, when I started it, it had no oil pressure in 10 seconds. I would have shut it down and checked something. GM engineers took them long enough to get rid of Siamese ports. I do like that. Having symmetrical ports like the Ford does, I like that better. I'm talking about the small block Chevys. LS Swap Barracuda. I don't like the earlier Barracudas. That's right. I said it. I'm 71. When you do cam swaps on a dyno, you said you reuse lifters. Would you do this in something that will stay together for a long time? Yes, I would. If I was reusing all of the other stuff on the motor and putting it in something, I'd reuse the lifters. And to give you an idea of that, that L33 that I have has more than 500 dyno pulls on it. So that's been staying together for a long time. Started my truck. It has a knock. Can't understand. Uh-oh. If an LS cannot be crossbred to a Ford, what motor would you put in a 41 Willys? I would put an LS in it. Or something weird if you wanted to do something weird. You have stock lifters that are in good shape. There's nothing wrong with them. I agree. I think that the factory stuff is really good. Yes, AMC used parts from all three. Todd, did you start it up dry? Do you sure that it has oil and all that? 302 Godzilla. Oh, all the Fords that will fit in there. Will you ever revisit the Big Bang 5.3? I don't think so. That's pretty low on the list. Main problem with modern Ford V8s is that they're physically massive compared to an LS. They are big. I mean, if you look at the like valve cover to valve cover dimension, it's pretty big, especially on a 4-valve deal. GM sucks. That's why I put a turbo 400 in everything that actually moves. So why is I don't understand the correlation there. Get away! What's going on? Turbo 400s do rule. It's right there in the name. It says turbo on it. I want more boost, more compression, more power. Yeah. I thought that people would maybe try to get out of that video that the compression is the only thing that changed. After you list 4 or 5 other things, they don't listen to that. A 4L80's got to be more than a turbo 400, right? What's up with the ads on the live feeds now? They've been on there since the inception. Turbo should always have at least 20% ethanol or race gas. Got a Fox body on building. Have a 103 millimeter billet turbo. Okay, that's a big boy. Swapping with a 4L80. Planning going something like a 408. Combo of heads cam should I be looking at. Will be strictly a street no prep thing. I don't know about the rest of your combination. Do you know how high you want to run it and all that? What's the ideal proof moonshine for boost? It's not what we ran when we were at Brian Dooley Racing, although we tasted it. It's pretty strong. What's the reason the 317s exist? For the truck motors? To ward off detonation. Although I'd like to talk to an engineer and find out which one of those chamber designs would actually be more detonation resistant. Other than the change in chamber volume. Joseph, you're putting supercharger on a 318 Magnum. Nice. Yeah, for the airflow doesn't matter when you have boost. I guess it's our engine at pro mod horsepower. That's right, when it rolls into boost. Minimum proof for moonshine in a car should be 195 if you have a fuel filter. Yeah, that's Everclear or Mountain Clear if you're getting the generic stuff. At least back in the day, that's what it was. I heard bigger carb on a dual plane only works if it's a true fully divided dual planes. No divider, notch, cutout, or open type spacer. We're going to talk about that. Yeah, YouTube's in charge of the ads, not me. Only non-AFM lifter damage I've seen was due to valve float. Okay. Yeah, I mean, if you hammer on it, it can't be expected to do that for very long. 71 Plum Crazy Purple. I agree. Black Landau, hockey stick, stripes, pistol grip, 4-speed. Also needs the rear window louvers. Yeah. Now, are you talking about a CUDA, right? A 71 CUDA? Currently building a 6-liter LQ9 stage 3 truck cam. Has 317 heads. Milled 30 though. Because I know that that's not the word thought, because I know that you wouldn't do that. I built a 6-liter, bored 30 over, and got the rings for boost and have ARP rod bolts. I was told it's only good for 600. Is this true? You're about a third of the way there. Back in the day, GM was I don't know what you're talking about there. Nowadays, their diesels and their suspension are all they have going for them. Oh, comments. That's funny. 8 EB turbos on Zoomies to keep the plumbing managed. What's his name did that already? It didn't turn out that great. It's really cool, but be done a video on carburation versus fuel injection on an LS. Yes. And I did it using the same intake manifold, because that's really the important thing. If you do one fuel injection, one carburation, but you completely change the intake manifold, it has nothing to do with what's supplying the fuel. It has everything to do with the intake design change. And what I did was we ran the same intake manifold, a single plane intake manifold. We ran it carbureted. We ran it port injected with batch fire. We ran it port injected with sequential. And then we ran it port injected with sequential and doing individual cylinder trimming to make the air fuel all the same in all of the cylinders, because none of the other setups did that. Pre-prime the engine at startup, had 60 pounds of oil pressure. Uh-oh. What inline Ford engine would you build first? You're wanting to do one? The inline Ford engine that I have a couple of Barras in my storage, but the 300 is kind of the one that I'm interested in. Everything's brand new. A cam 5.3 with header port work. Would you just bring it to a tuner and have a set tune, or get the Holly and have infinite control? I think you could probably, if you have a stock ECU already, you could just probably go get a tune from Matt at Sloppy. Just one of his shelf tunes probably would go on there if you have the right injector size for what he's done before. Once tuned, I don't see why you need to change anything. The option is nice. A standalone's nice if you are gonna change things. That's good. But once you put the tune in there, the tune, contrary to what a lot of people think, and I just love the meme with the guy riding the bike and he shoves the stick in the spike in the spokes and then blames the tune. Tunes don't fall out of them. So if nothing has changed mechanically, nothing's changed electronically. It just runs and runs and runs. That's why your stock motor runs so good. Speaking of head design, all those motors use flat top pistons. I don't think that the piston design has an effect on how well the head works. I know that people are going to crucify me for that, but if you take a 243 head and put it on a flat top piston, or put it on a dish piston like a 5.3, the change has nothing to do with the head liking the piston or the flat top piston or the dish piston. It has everything to do with the fact that you just change the compression, and that's going to be the change in power. The head, I think, is going to do what the head does. McDonald's fryer grease and 12 valve. I thought you're supposed to put the Chinese food stuff in there. But I think any French fry oil or whatever, I think all that works. I picked up a used Garrett turbo. Wait, you had me at Garrett. 88 millimeter. An 88 millimeter Garrett's pretty big. I got a bare block 5.3 already. Should I scrap the idea and go straight to a 6 low? At what point is a single too large for a 5.3? Well, I don't know what your power level is, because an 88 millimeter Garrett is like a 1500 plus horsepower turbo. So are you wanting to go there? If you tell me that you want to make 800 horsepower, you just need a different turbo. Building turbo 5.3 that's going in a mud truck. What extra precautions, if any, would you take where the engine will see a lot of mud and water? I mean, I think you just have to do the are you doing a snorkel on it and stuff and doing the exhaust so water doesn't get up in there? And then I haven't not done mud trucks. I've seen some of them. Jason from JT Fab has done a bunch of those. I don't know if the in and the out would be a concern. And then also cooling, I think. Do those things have trouble with the radiators and stuff getting clogged up and the accessory drives getting clogged up with mud? I'd be concerned about that. Todd, you double checked all the clearances? Could it be a flex plate or something else? It's not a stroker, right? It's a standard displacement. One day we need a big company to donate a full race grade engine for a big bang to see how much more that they can take. Well, just look at what Nelson and those guys do with their stuff. My guess is dedicated turbo motors would be at least twice what the big bang numbers are. Looking to honestly make 12 to 1300 horsepower. Okay. I think that turbo is going to be a little soft for you for that range, but as long as you put a lot of stall and all that stuff in it. I didn't see a Texas speed crate motor make 10,000 horsepower. Yeah, you're not going to see too many motors on the planet make 10,000 horsepower. 70 pounds of oil pressure at idle. I don't know what motor you're talking about. And when it's cold, that might not be out of line. Is there a smaller balancer? There's a smaller damper, if that's what you're talking about. They're not balancers, but they do have smaller dampers. ATI has some small dampers. Tyler, talk to the guys at ATI. They have smaller diameter ones. Should do a build up at an EFI 300. You should do a build up in an EFI 300. I've heard they actually pick up power going to slightly bigger injectors because the stock injectors were undersized for mileage. That doesn't really make sense to me. Why would you make the injector size smaller for fuel mileage when you can control how much fuel the injector squirts out with the ECU? You don't adjust that by adjusting the injector size. You just adjust that by doing that in the computer. I don't understand that logic. And then, so are you saying that then it would then run lean as they would go to wide open throttle or something? Again, that doesn't seem right. The Ford 300 has 27 main bearings. It's pretty sturdy bottom end then, right? My 0411 P59 PCM was done by a tuner using HB tuners to compensate for the truck Norris cam and the 26 to 2800 stall in the 5.7. Shadow Ops, is that thing running around and driving now? Is the stall speed accurate in that? On 706 heads, would you remove the swirl ramp? I don't I'd have to ask Brian that question because I think that they probably have tested it both ways. I haven't, so I don't know. But if you pop through the wall on the rocker stud, no, you're going to put the stud in there anyways, and then just make sure that the stud doesn't stick down below, and make sure that it's ported essentially too, and it's not going to leak. You can put sealant on it. $1,200 plus wheel horsepower. Won't be street driven. Okay. Ford turning a big bang with LS heads. I don't think somebody's going to want to blow up their freshly done LS heads. Freshly welded. About the flat tops and head designs I wrote of, it's in regard to detonation from what you said earlier. One of the things, Shadow Ops, that you know that the OEMs did is they're using the same head on a flat top and on a dish on the LQ4 and the LQ9, and they obviously did a bunch of testing and R&D on the detonation sensitivity of that combination, of the higher performance LQ9 combination. And then I don't know if they, when they did that, that also included an upgrade for the computer system with regards to the knock sensor technology, that they're running them more aggressively or less aggressively with the knock sensor technology. I don't know that. They ran the same heads on both of them. Turbo people really get lost in peak horsepower number. Average power is going to win the race. That's the nice thing about a turbo, is that it makes a lot of average power. Do 862 head castings have problems with cracking? I think it's only the 706s. The swirl ramp allows for better optimization of the charge. They have Vortec heads for a reason. Would you trust long tube headers to handle boost without melting? Yeah, we've run long tube headers with boost, but I don't know if I had long tube headers and had turbos on it and I had them in a vehicle and was racing with them, I would definitely have supports on it. Made for real tornadoes. I'm going to race all you crazy fools when you get your turbo installed. 862s are created to replace 706 cast heads. Are there not early and later, are there non-cast tech 706 heads? Or are all of them bad? LS53 Sprint Car Class Quest. I'm sure they don't allow turbos in there, right? You get to see it flash up to that. Okay. What's the biggest cam you can run on an LM53 before running into valve clearance? Somewhere in the mid to high 230s at 50. Probably been asked a lot, but how much horsepower do you think a 4853 stock block can handle? I'm judging by the boost levels in mile an hour the guys have done. We know that the 6-liter went to more than 1,500, but I don't think that you should run it there, because I think that's already at a point where you'd have to be considering another block. I mean, we made runs like that, a few, but I don't think it's something I would go drag race like that. I know guys make pulls on them, but I don't think they last very long. I just know it pulls from the line effortlessly. Nice. If I get a sloppy stage 2 or best cam, what do I need to do for injectors, if anything? Yeah, you need to have, if your combination is going to make more than stock power, which a cammed version is going to by 50, 60, 70 horsepower, you need injectors that will support that additional power level. Got a Hitscam intake LS2 with a 3600 stall and 391 gears at normal for my RPM drop to be 1700 RPMs. I don't know what you mean. You mean, are you talking about a drop in gear, like it going from when it shifts from first to second or second to third, it drops that much? Or are you talking about it drives around at 1700 RPM? I don't know enough about LS heads, but if the 706 has a swirl ramp, then potentially I think a 317 would be better at higher RPM. It's not. For chamber designs, the 317 has the worst chamber. Knock testers are very sensitive in the valley. Does an LQ9 still have them in the valley, or are they on the outside of the block? What could be causing my fuel injected 302 to command the injectors to stay open longer? Erratic compression test read 95 psi across all the cylinders. I'd be concerned about if that's a cranking compression reading, I'd be concerned about that. But that has nothing to do with your injectors. I'm pulling out 4.8 and putting in a 6-liter. Standard bore, flat tops, 823 heads. Milled to 63. You could get them down that far. Will the intake manifold still bolt up when you did that? Socket intake, long tube header set for daily driver. So what cam would you advise on a 6-liter with 823 heads? Do you have a stock converter? Like what transmission? Do you want to use it with a stock converter? If you want to run it with a stock converter, one of the two cams that I have, either the low buck truck or the slightly bigger truck plus, the truck plus is going to make more power above 5,000 on a 6-liter and would make good power on that combination. And on a 6-liter, you might be able to use a stock converter on that, but you definitely could with the low buck truck camshaft. And I have a 6-liter video up on the low buck truck, and you can kind of see what it did. What cam kit do you recommend for an L92 without messing with the stock stall? Edgar, the low buck truck camshaft I have for a L92 would be good. You definitely could use a stock converter on that. I read that 862s have cracking in the same place. Have you ever done anything with desert running suspension? You mean, have I ever been involved in any of that racing? No, I haven't set up any trucks like that. I wonder if it's worth porting my 706 heads if they are Castex. Every shift goes from 6,800 to 5,100. Every shift at wide open throttle. I haven't seen too many transmissions where the gear splits are identical in every one of them. So that shouldn't be happening. It should go in relation to whatever the change in numerical gear is. And so it doesn't always usually go exactly the same on every one of them. Bob, you have a rod bearing problem? LQ9 being Gen 3 would be in the valley, Gen 4 is on the outside of the block. Do they not make Gen 4 LQ9s? What intake do you propose for the LS4 versus the factory one? I don't know what fits. Is this going in a front wheel drive version of something? The part of the problem with intake manifolds for that motor is that the accessory drive that they use doesn't allow some of the intake manifolds. But if it's a cammed LS4, am I thinking about the right one? Is that the front wheel drive one? I think that is. I would still pick a fast for most cases. What cam would you consider to be the next step up from the Truck Norris? Well, I have a Truck Plus camshaft that is the next step up from a Truck Norris. It goes from a 212 to a 219. You could go somewhere in between there to try to split the difference, but Cameron, see, you were thinking it and you willed it into existence. LS53 sprint car class question: at what lift camshaft do you start taking life away from stock valve train? Look to turn the motor 6800. Can a 600 lift cam be more destructive versus a 585? I think that you could argue that valve spring life would be less, but I don't know how much that would be. Would that be 1 RPM, you know, 1 cycle left, or 10 or 20? I don't know what that would be. I would be more concerned. I'd be less concerned about that than I would be concerned about the stability of the camshaft that you pick, of the load profile that you pick. And the stock valve train is going to go way beyond 6,800. You're not going to have problems at 6,800. If you have the right spring and the right camshaft and stock rockers in it, especially if you put, you know, they're not something that has 350,000 miles on them. Maybe you do a trunnion upgrade or something. You're not going to have a problem at 6,800. Going from 6,800 to 5,100 at each shift is okay. The 3,600 stall and 391 gears. Yeah, the stall speed and the rear end gear have nothing to do with that. The stall speed, since you're only dropping down to 5,100, you're past the stall speed of the converter, and the rear end gears have nothing to do with that. Only the gears in the transmission are going to determine what the drop down is from whatever your shift point is. First 600 Gen 4 was an LS2, and that was actually a hybrid, having some LS3 and or Gen 3 and Gen 4 stuff. The early ones, I think, were weren't they 24X? Something was. I remember the one that I had was early, and it was not a 58X, I think, or it was some weird combination of the crank and the camshaft. Because I remember the guy's telling me about, the engineers telling me about it. He said, you're going to have you might have trouble getting this working. We're like, we'll get it working. It'll be fine. Cross ram, it'll avoid the accessories. Yep. LQ4 was from 02 to 07. We done a video with your 219 cam. It's nearly the same as other cams you have tested. I'm just curious if you have it. I don't know if I have video up on that. I have dyno results on it, but I don't think I need to do some more videos on that. Normally I recommend the Lobot truck camshaft because it's, for most of the people, it seems to be a better fit. But for guys wanting more power, that other cam is there. So I bought this V car. What's a V car? BTR Red Hot kit. Put some trunnion upside down on the pedestals. That's not good. LS2 was a transition. Earlies were 24X and laters were 58. That's what I thought. Mine was a 24. I love that LS2. I thought it worked great. Any tips on what I should service on my 544 valve, especially a junkyard engine, and will be a manual? It depends. You might not have to do anything. I think if it's got a lot of miles on it, you probably should look at the chains and the guides for those, the tensioners maybe. Other than that, you need to just do a compression test and you know, just kind of see if it has oil pressure and stuff. I was told my converter might be too tight and to go bigger because my RPM shouldn't be dropping that much. No, if you're only dropping to 5,100 RPM and you have a 3,600 RPM stall, you're what they're saying is that you drop below that. You drop way below 5,100, and that's not happening. So you're fine. I'm an LS2. I want to squeeze some power out of NA. How do you think 706 heads would do? The LS2 comes with 10.9 compression with 243. 706s have a smaller chamber. Cam is a 231. You're going to make less peak power with a 706 head on there than you would with a 243 if both of those are not ported with that cam on a 6-liter. 706s might be a little better on the 6-liter that we tested. They were better up to about 5,000 or something. But at the top, the more head flow, they could take advantage of the more head flow. And it was 11 or 12 horsepower better on that. Front wheel drive, and you said the factory accessory drives are in the way. What would you need to do to ground fit? I'm the wrong guy to ask that because I don't do a lot of stuff in the vehicles, particularly on front wheel drive LS4 specific stuff. I was only talking to Brandon one time about that, because we were talking about different intake manifolds, and this is long ago, before I had tested that intake manifold. He said, oh, it's really bad. I'm like, it can't be worse than the early LS1. He goes, no, I think it is. I think it's way worse. And turned out he was right. But yeah, there is something going on there that stops you from being able to mount the throttle body or something. But I don't know what it is. For a stock TPI 350, what flat tap cam would you consider for all 60 the stock converter? Something very small. I don't know. How are you going to be able to tune it with the TPI? Bob, you have a CTSV. Those are good. We like those. What's the maximum amount of boost on a stock ring gap 6-liter from a Vortex supercharger? I'll tell you what. I'll give you a number if you can tell me what that stock ring gap is. Can you tell me what that is? And the reason I say that is because you can't. We don't know what the ring gap is. We don't know if it's 13, if it's 25. We don't know how much temperature you're putting into it. We don't know how long you're on the throttle for. We don't know what your tune is. We don't know what your air temperature is. We don't know what the ring. We essentially don't know what the ring temperature is. So we don't know when it will be okay. And it's not a boost versus stock ring gap thing. And it's not that. It's temperature versus existing ring gap. What horsepower and torque would you say a 4853 is comfortable at? It's stock compression or maybe de-stroked to 7. Oh, big money. What kind of power are you trying to make? Will low compression be the cause for running rich? And well, you shouldn't. That motor should have more than 95 pounds of cranking compression. So something's wrong. So you need to figure out what that is. You can tune TBI. You need a handful of old components. I'm still learning the process, but it's possible. Do you have to get Commodore 64 to? Is that the only one that has software for that? Damper is the only thing I haven't removed along with the timing cover. Chain seemed fine from the top. I think I'll reseal it and crank it over, see if it gets overpressure. That's where run stands would be really cool, to just run it and see if it has overpressure and stuff. Then you know if you put it in. Richard, you answered a good question related to why certain heads exist. My 5.7 has 243s. So it's an LS6. Yeah, my 4.8 has 862s. Yeah, on the small bore stuff, I wouldn't run. I know that they put 243s on a lot of the 5.3s, but that wouldn't be my head choice. I mean, it is on the it's the one that came on there, so I would run it and have run a lot on the L33. And if I was going to put boost on it, I'd leave that head on it because there's nothing that I would change to you. You can make so much power with that. That's going to be, and then the amount of power that you could make, that head is not going to hold it back. L98 with stock heads. They only flow around 200 CFM. Get a flat tap with similar spec to a ZZ4 cam. Okay. Windows XP. If you're burning oil, you might run rich. 1103 with the TPI. I think his thing, you guys are all saying TPI, but did I read that wrong? I thought he said it was a TBI. Oh, you guys are right. And see, I was wrong. I was reading it. I thought it was a throttle body injected motor, and that's why I was going low on the camshaft. But yeah, there's lots of good stuff, but you still are gonna have to tune it. TPIS has a bunch of them. Comp has a bunch of them. Summit probably has a bunch of them. They're all going to be small. They're all going to be like 212, 218, 218, 224, that kind of thing. If everything else is stock, I would go small on the camshaft. We got 2 minutes left. How do you feel about the short runner fabricated intakes for oval tracks? They work good. There are some that are better than others. I think for 4,000 to 7,000, actually for 4,000 to 7,000 to 5.3, I think I'd still use a fast manifold. What are my options to reduce the RPM drop? You have to change your gearing, your internal transmission gearing. 243s are using BTR 600 Beehive springs. Okay. I might just do the dual springs from PSI or pack later on the 243s instead of the 862s. Richard, why are guys shaving their heads at an angle? I thought he was talking about me. I'm like, what angle am I doing that at? And then you got specific, and I'm like, wow, that's my razor doesn't have an angle gauge on it. Maybe I'm not buying the good ones. I am buying the cheap ones. If you angle mill the head, you can get more of a change in chamber volume for the amount that you're taking off. But then you have to adjust the intake manifold too. Silly to dismiss my 87 octane comment when it's just as true with 91. I don't know what was the 87 octane comment. I'm going to scroll back. Let's see, who was this? This is Brad. So let's see, Brad. Scrolling. I see a gear thing, Brad. So scrolling back, not seeing anything. Scrolling. How far back there was it, Brad? I'm not seeing it. Going all the way back to the beginning. Fazeni said, go back to the beginning. Only FM lifter damage I've seen was due to valve float. Yeah, so I'm not seeing it, dude. So I don't really know what you're talking about. Okay, Windows XP. Scrolling. Is a fault tolerance deal for what I'm getting at. 23-degree nitrous head. Not burn oil, have no vacuum leaks, just runs rich, replace all the sensors and O2s that need with the computer, same thing. How can it be running rich if are you reading? Can you read the sensors and see what they're saying? Because if the sensor's showing rich, the computer should be adjusting. A comment on the other video earlier today, 706. So it wasn't a comment here on the live feed. It was something else. Was it guys running 87 octane with a turbo? Yeah, there's not very many guys doing that, and I don't ever recommend that they do that. How do you adjust a plastic intake if heads are milled more than 30 or so, or angle milled? I don't know how you're going to do that, and that's one of the problems with the LSs is that if you try to mill too much off of the heads, that you get intake fitment problems. .853 at like 700 to 800 with a single turbo, unless two smaller turbos or twin setup. It's not going to be better. It's going to be the same. I mean, 700 to 800 is like a VS Racing 78, 75. It'll be fine. Going to get some shut-eye. That's good. I had a running rich code because my oil was low and hydraulic lifters. It's weird, the things that affect that. LS2 cams at 231, 246. Cameron, if you I have videos up on changing to LS3 stuff from 243 stuff, but it's going to be 25 or 30 horsepower. But again, applies to 91. But it doesn't apply to 87, and that's my comment was about the 87, right? You shouldn't try to exaggerate to one side and then go, oh, but it still applies. You can't do that. My comment was valid about 87. If you're trying to run 87 and you're trying to run it with a turbo, you shouldn't be doing that. I'm not saying you can't, because my wife's turbocharged Mercedes, we put 87 in it, and it has all the knock sensor technology to make that work. But it's still not something I'm going to recommend to a guy. And like I said, I discussed I'm trying to get my thing here. I discussed in the video about the tuning window of 317 heads. So I don't really understand what the comment is. Why are you not adjusting there? What? I don't know. It's got a mind of its own. Hot mess. I don't have your 5.3. I'm assuming you're talking about a L86 or an LC9 or something like that. Come on, you stupid camera. There. Oh, I just had it and I killed it again. We're having like camera was. There. My comment was valid too. Okay, Brad, you were right. We'll all tell you that you're right. I don't know what your problem is. I talked about the fact that the question that we were trying to answer wasn't about a detonation threshold question. What you're talking about is timing. If you add more timing or add more boost, you're going to make more power. We know both of those are true. The question is, will the airflow of the 317 head overcome the benefit of having the 706 head, which we know makes more power? Will that ever happen? And the answer is no, it won't ever happen. It's not going to happen. And then trying to squeeze in a conversation about something that I already covered about the tuning window is not the answer. That's not the answer. How did you get a job at West Tech? The most fun thing ever. I've never worked for West Tech, so I've never worked for them. Too expensive, 78, 75 turbo. You could go with the GT45, and that will get you to 700. It's going to be hard pressed to get to 800, though. 8. That would be nice. I wish I was that old. Not anymore. Oh, dang. It was only when I was fuzzy. I was a fuzzy 20. Nice. Can't believe I finally caught you. Oh, on the live feed. Okay, cool. Turbos usually get cheaper when they go on sale. Does Viren stuff, does he, I mean, Matt, I think, I thought that Matt was selling those or something. They had some kind of deal going on there. But the 7875s, do they go on sale? I thought that the first gen ones do, and those should get you to 800 horsepower, I would think. Boostworks, what's going on? But did you have a question? Are 5.3 LM4s still plentiful, and how many LM4s were actually produced? I don't know about production numbers on those. The ones that I see more often than not are LM7s. They're just your Gen 3 run-of-the-mill, low-power iron block, 706 headed, truck manifold thing. We see a lot of those because we see a lot of Gen 3s. Although lately, when I've been going there, I've been seeing a few more Gen 4s, and I've even seen some 6-liter stuff, which is good. VS goes on sale every now and then, and certain distributors for VS you can find on YouTube. Okay. And there's got to be, he's got to be not the only one that's selling that turbo. There got to be other people too. Would an LS2 or Vortec 6-liter be better to build for power? If you're trying to make lots of power, an iron block is going to be better than that LS2 aluminum block. If you want to make 700 nitrous, what size injector do I need? Well, it depends. If most nitrous setups add fuel and nitrous with the kit, like they have Fogger nozzle or whatever, and they add it with the kit. So you don't really need more injector for that. If you have enough injector to feed the NA motor, you're good. And then the nitrous and system adds the fuel and the nitrous. So that's not a problem. If you're injecting the nitrous just as nitrous and then adding the fuel with the injector, then you have to have a lot more injector. Otherwise, you're good. You just make a 500 horsepower motor, add a 200 shot, and you're good. Then you make 700. And on that note, it is time to go. Now I've made people mad. It's all good. I'll see you guys all tomorrow. Oh, BoostWorks. I gotta take care of you. Currently build aluminum 6-liter block. Currently makes 496 wheel horsepower. That's a lot. Would you recommend a 475 turbo to be 800 horsepower range? Yes, although you want to make 800 wheel horsepower. I mean, a 475 will get you to 800 wheel horsepower anyway. But that's the turbo that I would recommend. But if you're making almost 500 horsepower at the wheels, is that thing have a lot of a compression and ported head and a big camshaft and that kind of stuff? I think you could run a distributor off a chain off of a crank and a carb setup made from leftover junk to get an LS running up for super cheap. No, I don't think that would be cheap at all, because I don't think that the distributor is. I don't think you're going to be able to fabricate anything unless you're really good with a mill and a lathe to make a distributor work off of an LS. I think you'd be way cheaper just to buy the MSD thing and then get a distributor and intake manifold and do it that way. I do want to buy some knock sensors to find actual limits of these combinations. I need knock sensors for my truck because mine are bad and have been for a long time, or something's going on there. And because I have the check engine light, and we saw when we were trying to do the tuning with the blower stuff that it has just taken all the timing out of it. And so something's going on. The sensor, I haven't looked at them, but I'm pretty sure the sensor's bad or the wire's cut or something. And so I got to take the intake manifold off and fix that so that I can get it back to running the way that it should run. We'll just swap to a much smaller cam when turbo. Yeah, you don't need a big turbo for that. If you got a 6-liter, any kind of mild cam like that 219 cam that I have, that'll be good for that. And then you could make all the power with the turbo. I have a big block 454 with 045 small oval casting heads. Are they the peanut port heads then? Is that what you're talking about? Thanks for answering everyone's questions. I'm going to hit up Mad at Sloppy. Let's see what we can do. Well, we've made with ported versions of those heads, we've made more than 500 horsepower NA, 530 or 40 or something. So you could certainly make 1,000 horsepower with those if they were ported. And you probably could make 1,000 horsepower with them even if they weren't ported, if you put enough boost to it. Yeah, I don't, Gus, I don't know what I don't recognize that part number, so I don't know what they are. But you can make a lot of power with them. Those heads won't be, even if they're the smallest peanut port heads and the worst flowing big block heads that they made, that's still not going to stop you from making, as long as you don't want to make 1,500, if you want to make 700 or 800 or whatever, that you'll easily be able to do that. I'll see you guys all tomorrow.